Hello, Zero Books readers. This is part one of a two-part series of videos that will return to some of the ideas that were in our recent video on postmodernism. Only this time, we'll step back from the 70s and 80s and into the 19th and the first half of the 20th century to do so. These videos will ask the philosophical question, what is it to be human? Or what is it to be a self or a subject? Only instead of arguing with Derrida while referring to Bojack Horseman and The Good Place, we'll take on Max Stirner and Martin Heidegger while referencing Nicholas Ray's 1955 film Rebel Without a Cause. But before we get to any of that, I have to make a comment about Jordan Peterson, because I want to use a few of his ideas as a starting point for this video. And it's recently come to my attention that Peterson has basically renounced his former commitment to free speech.
If you ever want to think about something, that's exactly what you have to do, right? You want to take arguments that are against your perspective and you want to make them as strong as you possibly can so that you can fortify your arguments against them. You don't want to make them weak because that just makes you weak.
Have you ever debated a Marxist supporter? Have you ever debated someone who is pro-equality of outcome?
No, they don't debate me. No, I haven't, because people don't do it. They don't ask me to do it. There's this professor, I think his name is Wolf. He put a challenge up on YouTube to me a couple of weeks ago to debate him. It's like, well, how about no? I don't buy any of it, and I don't understand for the life of me why it's any more permissible in polite society to proclaim proudly that you're a Marxist after the absolute catastrophe of the 20th century than it is to claim that you're a National Socialist. So that's how it looks to me. I'm no fan of left-wing collectivists, or those on the right for that matter.
If there's ever going to be a moment when it becomes obvious that Peterson is contributing to the destruction of what he'd call the Western tradition, this is that moment. He's not only hypocritically abandoning his former stance on free speech, but he's shutting down the very dialogue that he supposedly thinks is central to civilization. It's not surprising, but it is disappointing. Still, just because Jordan Peterson doesn't want to engage with my ideas, that won't stop me from engaging with his.
That's Nietzsche's realization. He said, look, imagine that you live within a belief system, and then something arises to challenge the belief system. Not only does the belief system collapse, but something worse happens. Your belief in belief systems collapses. And that's the road to not. Now, it doesn't have to, because you can jump from one belief system to another. But sometimes that doesn't work, is that you do a meta-critique and you say, oh, I was living in this protective structure and it turned out to be flawed. Okay, one alternative is jump to another protective structure. Fine. Another alternative is protective structures themselves are not to be trusted. Bang, you're in chaos. How the hell are you going to get out of that? That's the pathway to nihilism.
The other night I rewatched the 1955 classic movie Rebel Without a Cause, and I couldn't help but notice how 1950s paranoia about teenage delinquency and gender roles is still around today. I couldn't help but see a correlation between, say, Peterson's concern for the lost boys of today and the depiction of the lost boys and girls in this movie that made James Dean a cultural icon. But it's not just Peterson's gender politics that might as well have been lifted from this old Technicolor melodrama about staying out past curfew, games of chicken and stolen vehicles, and henpecked husbands, but Peterson's more philosophical concerns as well. In the movie Rebel Without a Cause, James Dean's high school class goes on a field trip to the planetarium at the Griffith Observatory in Los Angeles. The scene there propels the story as Dean's character, Jim Stark, attempts to fit in with his new classmates, only to have his efforts lead to a theatrical knife fight in the planetarium's parking lot. However, I couldn't help but notice that the lecture given by the astronomer during the scene, the lecture the high schoolers are only half paying attention to, provides not just a commentary on the broader themes of the movie, but also could be taken as a summary of what the philosopher Rick Roderick once described as the modern myth that sets up the background for our lives even today. I want to read that lecture to you, what the astronomer says. For many days before the end of our Earth, people will look into the sky and notice a star, increasingly bright and increasingly near. As this star approaches us, the weather will change. The great polar fields of the north and south will rot and divide, and the seas will turn warmer. The last of us search the heavens and stand amazed, for the stars will still be there, moving through their ancient rhythms. The familiar constellations that illuminate our night will seem as they have always seemed, eternal, unchanged, and little moved by the shortness of time between our planet's birth and its demise. And while the flash of our beginning has not yet traveled the light years into distance, has not yet been seen by planets deep within the other galaxies, we will disappear into the blackness of the space from which we came. Destroyed as we began in a burst of gas and fire, the heavens are still and cold once more. In all the complexity of our universe and the galaxies beyond, the Earth will not be missed. Through the infinite reaches of space, the problems of man seem trivial and naive indeed, and man, existing alone, seems to be an episode of little consequence. That's all. Thank you very much.
Now, that's a very important myth. Many of us believe that one too. But against that background, it becomes difficult as we chip away at our daily little lives, selling shoes, selling tires, teaching class, to try to find any damn thing that means anything.
This myth might be considered a refutation, or at least a rebuttal, to the Christian myth of redemption. Instead of the Star of Bethlehem leading mankind to salvation, the astrophysicist describes a star that presages not only our destruction, but our understanding of our own meaninglessness. However, while Jordan Peterson and his 1950s doppelgangers, people like Paul Goodman or Robert Linder, whose 1944 book provided the title for Ray's film, might consider this new myth of meaninglessness to be a modern construction, the rebel philosopher Max Stirner considered the fact of the natural world's indifference towards the fate of man to be what set up the conditions necessary for the myth of Christianity to arise. The indifference of the world towards man set up its opposite, the indifference to the world in man. And it was through this negation that the world, as Max put it, ceased to be overpowering, unapproachable, sacred, divine, and so on. For us, it is undeified. It is no longer sacred. And now, we are free to treat it entirely as we please. For Stirner, the indifferent universe and the Christian response to it can both be considered as steps towards freedom. That is, towards his own brand of freedom, defined by egoism. And yet, even some of Stirner's admirers aren't convinced that the problem of an indifferent and ultimately meaningless universe can be overcome by such dialectical tricks. In fact, as Jacob Blumenfeld explains in his soon-to-be-released book, All Things Are Nothing to Me, the post-structuralist philosopher Gilles Deleuze admired Stirner precisely because old Max had failed to create a positive meaning. Deleuze argued that by taking the dialectic to the extreme, Stirner pushed it until the essence of the dialectic was revealed, a pure I, which in the end is nothingness itself. According to Deleuze, if we are reduced to turning to ourselves to justify our lives, if we openly embrace the idea that we stand alone, unique, cut off, and separate, not only from the universe, with both its original and then final Big Bang, but from all that occurs in between these two moments, we end up with no justification at all. And a quick look at Stirner's biography at least appears to confirm this assessment. Stirner was a loser. He was a man who declared himself to be the ultimate sovereign, a man who not only considered the natural world to be his to rule over, but who held his own ideas and his own faculties of reason to be his playthings. The ideas of ethics or philosophy were, to Stirner, only spirits or abstractions. As the owner of his own life, Stirner, quote, thrust spirits or ideas away into their vanity, so that they have no longer any power over him, as no earthly might has power over the Christian spirit. And yet, he died divorced, penniless, and on the run from creditors. If his own life was the only standard, if his own selfish desire the only good, then it's pretty clear that something went wrong. What the psychologist Robert Linder said about psychopathic juvenile delinquents seems to apply to Stirner as well. According to Linder, the juvenile delinquent, quote, is a rebel without a cause, an agitator without a slogan, a revolutionary without a program. In other words, his rebelliousness is aimed to achieve goals satisfactory to him alone. He is incapable of exertions for the sake of others. All his efforts represent investments designed to satisfy his immediate wishes and desires.
That's Nietzsche's realization. He said, look, imagine that you live within a belief system, and then something arises to challenge the belief system. Not only does the belief system collapse, but something worse happens. Your belief in belief systems collapses. That's the pathway to nihilism.
It might be easy for me to end this video here. What I want to say is, strangely enough, exactly what Jordan Peterson just said. If we follow Stirner's argument all the way to the end, we will inevitably end up abetting a society stricken with psychosis, selfishness, absurdity, and so on and so on. However, I can't just let Peterson's version of anti-egoism, this conservative critique of nihilism, be the final word, and not just because I don't want to give the King Lobster credit for saying something that is true enough. Rather, the trouble is that there is no way to retreat from this predicament into a mere belief system, as Peterson suggests. There's no way home again. No newfangled Jungian version of Christianity, for instance, that will fill in this gap in the egoist's subject. After all, the previous traditions were what led us to this moment. What's needed is not a new belief system, but a better critique. This dilemma isn't merely about our ideas to begin with. One of the most thoroughgoing critiques of Stirner can be found in Karl Marx's book, The German Ideology. In it, he points out again and again how the trouble with Stirner is that as much as he claims to want to bust all spooks, to leave the realm of spirits and ideals behind, he always remains at the level of ideas. For example, Stirner imagines that the workers can liberate themselves by ceasing to work and then taking the products of their labor up as objects for their own enjoyment. But this is muddle-headed, as Marx points out, because Stirner supposes that what is produced by labor would continue to exist and be reproduced as an object to be regarded and enjoyed, even if the producers cease to work. Marx goes on, quote, as he did earlier, Stirner transforms the workers, who are scattered throughout the civilized world, into a private club, which is only to adopt a decision in order to get rid of all difficulties. End quote. In the movie Rebel Without a Cause, James Dean asks his father, in various ways, how he should act if he's to become a man. But his father doesn't know. At another point in the picture, Natalie Wood's family, her father and brother and mother, are sitting at the dinner table together. Her father is complaining about Natalie's behavior, about how she seems to want to continue to act as a girl, demanding kisses from her father, for instance, when she's already become a woman. Natalie's mother responds that she's only going through a phase. She says, "She'll outgrow it, dear. It's just the age." At that point, Natalie's younger brother chimes in.
She'll outgrow it, dear. It's just the age. Said Tommy J.
And it's true. That is, the younger brother is obviously misunderstanding the Fordian family drama he's witnessed. But he's also correct here. The line references the scene in the planetarium and the end of the world that was staged there. Only now we're reminded that we need not wait for a natural disaster in order to see that bright light in the sky that will put an end to the human project. We're in an age now where nothing seems to fit. And if we're going to understand why we've become rebels without any cause, if we're going to figure out how to solve what in the movie is a crisis of the family, but which in reality has proven to be a continuing and moving crisis in the family, in the culture, in our political institutions, and in our economy, neither waiting the moment out nor acting out based on our preconceptions will work. Our beliefs have been undermined, but what is worse is that our practices, our productive and political relations, are undermining both our beliefs and our future. Thanks for watching this Zero Books video. If you enjoyed it, keep your eye out for part 2 in the weeks to come, or subscribe to this channel and click on the notifications bell so that you'll be alerted whenever we release a new video. You should also consider supporting us on Patreon. Our patrons get access to our Inside Zero Books podcast every week and can get access to the Zero Books Book Club and help us to continue making online content from the left.